Hey everyone, welcome back to another educational video. And this week, or I guess this month, we are going to be doing it on orcas, or some of you guys might know them as killer whales. So, let's get into it. So, first, the scientific classification here. Also, we have a picture of the orcas here breaching. But anyways, we might not go over all of these here, but I'll go over a few. So, the domain is Eukaryota, kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia, and then Artiodactylia, and then infraorder doesn't really matter that much. Family looks like Delphinidae, genus Orcianus, and then species is O. orca or Orcianus orca. So the naming, so they're commonly referred to as killer whales, as I'm sure everyone about knows. And they're actually not a type of whale. They're actually a type of dolphin. Orcianus, meaning kingdom of the dead, or belonging to Orcus. Orcus was the god of the underworld. So that means there are like, I guess like citizens of the kingdom of the dead kind of thing. So kind of interesting name. Interesting, I like it. Sometimes they're referred to as blackfish, which is a name also used for other whale species. And then Grampus is a former name for the species, but is now not really used as much because it could be confused with the genus Grampus, whose only member is the Rhesus dolphin. So there are some different types of dolphins. So there are 3 to 5 types of orcas, and they may be distinct enough to be considered different races, subspecies, or possibly even species. So it's likely that the O. orca will be, or Orcianus orca, will be split into a number of different species or subspecies. And research off the coast of North America has identified that there are 3 types they have found, which are fish-eating residents, mammal-eating transients, and then offshores. And then there are 4 types that have been documented in Antarctica, 2 dwarf species, the Orcianus nanus, and then Orcianus gallicus. And the groups are numbered from A to D, and I have a picture here behind me of them. And my best guess, because they're not actually like labeled other than just like the types or whatever, but I'm guessing the B1 and B2 have to be the dwarf species here. And then there's the C and D species in A. So, and they all have a little bit different look, not by much at all. But there we go. So, what about the size of these orcas? So, orcas are the largest living member of the dolphin family, and males typically range from 6 to 8 meters, which is 20 to 26 feet long, and they weigh around an excess of 6 tons, or 5.9 long tons and 6.6 short tons, which I don't really care much for that long and short tons. So they're just 6 tons around. Then females are smaller, generally ranging from 5 to 7 meters, which is 16 to 23 feet long, and weigh about 3 to 4 tons. Calves, or the baby orcas, weigh around 180 kilograms, or 400 pounds at birth. And then they are 2.4 meters long, or 7.9 feet long. So that's still bigger than like most humans. Like a large amount of humans. Then orcas may attain larger sizes, as males have been recorded up to 9.8 meters or 32 feet long, females at 8.5 meters or 28 feet long. And large males can weigh over 10 tons. So they can get very, very big. Like those are just averages at the first half. These are kind of like the maximum we've seen. So, some characteristics of orcas. So, most of these you'll probably know from actually just looking at an orca or whatnot. But orcas are mostly black, but with sharply bordered white areas. The entire lower jaw is white, and from here, the coloration stretches across the underside to its genitalia area. The eyes have white oval-shaped patches behind and above them. A gray or white saddle patch exists behind the dorsal fin across the back. Newborns, white areas are yellow or orange when they first are born. And some Antarctic orca species are brown and yellow due to the diatoms in the water. And then there are both albino and melatonistic orcas that have been documented. So here we have some pictures. So first, let's look over here. So the one up top here is a male orca. You can tell that by the bigger fin on its back, and then its fin is more like a paddle shaped, like a bigger paddle. Plus, they're bigger. So females, smaller dorsal fin, and then smaller, I guess, paddle fin. Whatever. Then you can also see on their backs there, right behind their dorsal fin, they have their saddle-like spot. You can see the whites above their eyes and below their jaw. And then if you look over to the other side here, we have the ones where the genitalia region, like the underside of them. And yeah, so I'll get to a good look at an orca. So in these species, there is sexual dimorphism, so the males and females will not look exactly the same. So one of these is males and females have different patterns of black and white skin in their genitalia area. So I have another picture down here below that shows what female and males look like there. And then, like I was talking about before, the orca's pectoral fins, or the large fins on the side, are large and rounded, resembling paddles, and those males significantly larger than those of females. The dorsal fin of males is about 1.8 meters or 5.9 feet high, more than twice the size of females, and males' fins are more like an elongated isosceles triangle, whereas females are more curved at the top. And then adult males have longer lower jaws than females. So if we go back here, you can see the big fin. You can see that the males, of course, on top is larger jawed. And then you can look at the genitalia region, which that is of a female right there on the side. So, the range of orcas. The range of orcas is everywhere. Everywhere there's water. Like, everywhere there's an ocean and stuff like that that's connected by an ocean, there could be orcas there. Because they travel around a lot. So, there are a lot in the Antarctic region. There's off the coasts of everywhere. They're everywhere, okay? So, orcas can be found in all oceans and most seas, and they prefer higher latitudes and coastal areas, like most animals. Surveys indicate that the highest density of orcas are in the northeast Atlantic, around the Norwegian coast, North Pacific, along the Aleutian Islands, the Gulf of Alaska, and Southern Ocean off most of the coast of Antarctica. Then occasionally orcas swim into freshwater rivers. They've been documented 100 miles or 160 kilometers up the Columbian River in the United States. Then also they've been seen in the Fraser River in Canada and the Horikawa River in Japan. So even if it's not salt water, they can still go up like freshwater rivers and stuff like that. So anything that's connected to the ocean is fair game. Okay, so the population size. Worldwide population estimates are uncertain. They don't know for sure how many like orcas there are, but the consensus suggests that there's a minimum of 50,000 orcas in 2006. Local estimates include roughly 25,000 in the Antarctic, 8,500 in the tropical Pacific, 2,250 to 2,700 off the cooler Northeast Pacific, and then 500 to 1,500 off the off Norway. And then Japan's Fisheries Agency estimates that there are 2,000 in the 2000s that there's 2,321 orcas were in the seas around Japan. So that gives like most of them are in the Antarctic, and then off like Pacific. Well, yeah, Pacific has the next closest, I guess. So, feeding. Orcas are apex predators, meaning that they themselves have no natural predators in the world that we know of, at least. And sometimes they're called wolves of the sea, and because they hunt in groups like wolves. And orcas hunt a variety of prey, including fish, cephalopods, which are squids and octopuses, mammals, sea turtles, birds, and yeah. Orcas spend most of their time at the shallow depths, which they occasionally will dive several hundred meters depending on what prey, which I'm guessing if they're going after squids and octopuses, that's probably when they go down that far. So these orcas can be broken down by their feeding type, which the fish-eating orcas prey around 30 species of fish. The Norwegian and Greenland species feed on the sea herring, salmon, chinook, chum salmon, and whenever they go after especially the sea herring and stuff, they'll use a type of carousel feeding that they use from smaller prey like herring. And I have a picture down here that shows them carousel feeding. So basically they'll swim around a group of herring and get them into a carousel where they'll just swim around in circles, and then they'll just swim through it and gather up all the fish. In New Zealand, sharks and rays appear to be a more important prey. Short-tailed stingrays, then common threshers, smooth-head hammerheads, blue sharks, basking sharks, short-finned makos, and whatnot. And then I have a picture there of an orca eating a poor stingray. Orcas have also been seen preying on small whale sharks and even great white sharks, which that really makes my heart sad because whale sharks are like one of my favorite species. But they'll herd them to the surface and strike them with their tail flukes. Yeah, so like mammals and stuff like that, they'll push down like other whale species and stuff. They'll push down to the bottom so they can't come up for oxygen. On average, orcas eat 227 kilograms or 500 pounds each day. So they have to eat quite a bit, but they're big animals. So, I mentioned them eating great whites. So, when an orca enters an area that great white sharks are around, the great white sharks will leave their hunting grounds. They do not want to mess with orcas. And they will not return for up to a year, even if the orcas are only passing by or through the area. And orcas have been seen killing sharks just to eat their livers, and then leaving the rest of the corpse just for anything else. And you might be thinking, well, why do they eat just the liver? Well, that's because the livers are very calorie dense, so they're a good food source. And then I have pictures here of the Jaws theme, and it's an orca coming after a great white shark instead of a great white shark going after a human. And then I have another on the other side is a picture of an orca, and you can see that they're going directly for the liver there in that picture. And I've been heard that they do it with almost surgical precision, like a surgeon. So it's very impressive, but also very scary that like a animal like the orca goes after sharks, especially great white sharks, which you think of being like not unkillable, but like very hard to kill. So the next feeding type we'll go over is mammals and seabirds. So orcas have been observed preying on terrestrial mammals such as moose that are swimming between islands of the northwest coastal of North America, which when I heard this before I even started looking into orcas, that I saw a meme that, actually I should have had the meme on here. But anyways, the meme showed a moose that was swimming around underwater eating like the seagrass and stuff like that, and then there was a scuba diver that was sitting there like looking at the moose, and then all of a sudden an orca just swims by and picks up the moose, and the scuba diver is just like freaked out. I thought it was pretty funny. So then orcas often disable their prey before killing it and eating it, which this may involve throwing it into the air, slapping it with its tails, ramming it, or breaching it, and landing on it. So I have a picture there on the bottom of an orca hitting That's either a seal or a sea lion into the air. Can't really tell by that. But then it's recorded to prey on smaller dolphins and porpoises. So even though they are a dolphin species, like a type of dolphin, they eat other dolphins and porpoises. They also eat beluga whales and narwhals. They're also been seen eating sperm whales, gray whales, humpback whales, and blue whales. The large whales will require a lot more effort and coordination to kill, and orcas often target the calves of these species. So they'll usually do these inside their pods or their groups, and they'll all go after like one whale or something like that. And that's where I was talking about they'll push it to the bottom of the ocean, or like keep pushing it down and like bullying it so it can't come up for a breath of oxygen. Then there's the seal species, which are seals, sea lions, and walruses. The penguin species, the Gintu penguin, the chinstrap penguin, the king penguins, and the rockhopper penguins. The cormorants and gulls, which are the birds, which this is an interesting thing that they'll do to get birds to come onto the water to attack them. So they will regurgitate fish onto the surface, which will then attract the birds and seagulls, and then they come up and eat the birds and also the fish that they regurgitated. So they basically bait the birds to come down to the water so they can get them. So, the behavior of these whales. So, frequently they will engage in surface behavior, such as breaching and tail slapping. So, breaching is just them coming up above the surface and like jumping, kind of like I have the picture here. They may have a variety of purposes, such as courtship, communication, dislodging parasites, or play. So, there might be reasons why they do these breachings and tail slappings, but we do not really know for sure yet. Orcas will engage in surplus killing, where they kill something but do not eat it. So they'll kill for the heck of it, which is kind of evil in my eyes. But it's notable for their complex societies, such as elephants and higher primates. So they're very smart, and since they have their pods and stuff like that, they live together very closely, and they're very social. Males typically will maintain strong relationships with their mothers, and more so their mothers than other females. So this will go into their social structure. So pretty much we'll go from the smallest groups up to the biggest group. So the smallest one we'll go over is the family groups, which are based on matronines, or the matriarchs. And it consists of the eldest female, and then her sons, and then her daughters, and then the descendants of her daughters. And the average size of these groups is about 5.5 mammals, so somewhere between 5 and 6 animals in there. And then closely related matronines form loosely aggregations called pods. So different oldest females, or matriarchs, will also make groups called pods, and this will consist of 1 to 4 of these family groups. So you'll have the oldest female, and then her sons, daughters, and descendants, and then also another orca eldest female, which has her sons, daughters, and like whatnot. So then there are also clans, which are composed of different pods of similar dialects. So clan ranges overlap, and mingling pods have different clans. So they're not just like one clan. Like, different pods can be different parts of different clans, or they can overlap ranges. So one pod can be in a couple different clans. And then communities consist of pods that regularly associate with each other but share no maternal relations or dialects. So they don't really talk with each other that much, or they do not share like a bloodline or anything, but they still do associate with each other. So it'll go from family groups to pods to clans to community. So whenever I was talking about dialects and stuff like that, we can think of those as their vocalizations. There's 3 categories of sounds that they use to communicate. So those can be from clicks to whistles to pulsed calls. So clicks, we believe, are to be used primarily for navigation and then discriminating between prey and other objects. It's also commonly heard during social interactions. Then all members of a resident pod use similar calls, known collectively as a dialect, kind of like I was talking before. And then call patterns and structure are distinct between matronines. So newborns produce calls similar to their mothers. So call patterns like that are closely related to their family groups, or their bloodline, I guess. So, intelligence. Since you can probably guess for their hunting techniques and whatnot like that, they're very intelligent. So orcas have the second heaviest brain among marine mammals, and that means they have more gray matter and more neurons than any mammal, including humans. And then I have a picture to my side here that shows an orca brain next to a human brain, and yeah, it's very much bigger. Oh, actually, there you go. So orca compared to human brain. Then orcas will imitate others and seem to deliberately teach skills to their kin. So we'll go over some things that they teach each other, but one of these is if you see the other picture there is a seal or a sea lion on an iceberg, and what sometimes they'll do is they will jump up on the ice, breaking it, or sometimes they'll go underneath and flip over the ice, and they'll just do all these different things to try to get at the prey. So they'll teach this to their kin or their babies or whatnot. Then Alaskan orcas have learned to steal fish from long lines. So fishermen fish with long lines up in the Alaskas, and orcas have learned to take the fish off those. And they've also, fishermen have tried to put out long lines as decoys and stuff like that. The orcas have learned that these are decoys, and they'll still go after the ones that have fish on them. They're very smart, scarily smart. So let's go over the life cycle, and we'll go over the life cycle of males, females, and newborns because they're a little bit different. But female orcas begin to mature around the age of 10, and they reach peak fertility around age of 20. And females often breed until the age of 40. And orcas are among the few animals that undergo menopause and live for decades after they've finished breeding. That's why we talk about the matriarchs and stuff like that being, or the eldest female being the leaders. And the lifespan of a wild female averages 50 to 80 years. And here I have a picture showing basically this stuff. So we have the newborn, which is orange in color and fades about 1 to 2 years. 5-year-old males and females look the same. Then the 11 to 40 years is their reproductive years. And 40 plus is post-reproductive years. Then we'll go over males. So males will reach sexual maturity around the age of 15, but do not typically reproduce until the age of 21. Wild males will live around 29 years on average, with a maximum of around 60. Males mate with females from other pods, which prevent inbreeding. So whenever I guess the male gets of breeding age, he will leave his family group and will go to another pod to breed. And one male known as Old Tom was reportedly spotted every winter around 1840s and 1930s off the New South Wales of Australia, which would mean he made it to 90 years of age, 90 years old, which is much bigger than the maximum age of 60, which I heard stories that it actually was not Old Tom after a while, but a lot of people say it was. So you can take that with a grain of salt that there's actually a orca that lived to 90. And then I have over here, which is of course about the same thing as before, but as a male. So then we have the life cycle of offspring. So the gestation varies from 15 to 18 months for orcas. Mothers usually calve a single offspring about once every 5 years, so they won't even have an offspring every year. That is like about every 5. And births will occur at any time of year, although winter is the most common. And during the first 7 months of life, about 37 to 50% of calves die. So there's not a very high survival rate for them in the wild. Weaning begins at around 12 months of age and is complete by 2 years. And then, this is a little sad, but infanticide has been seen in captivity and at least once in the wild, which it is the intentional killing of a young offspring by a mature animal. And it's theorized that the male killed the young calf in order to mate with his mother, which that is seen in a lot of different species around the world, so that's probably the most reliable answer for it. And then I have a picture of a female orca with her newborn calf, and you can still see the orange-yellow coloration on its white. So, now we are over like all the stuff I want to talk about, like the main things about orcas. Now we're going to get to some other sad stuff about orcas and like why there are so few of them, which they're doing better now. But we're going to go over some threats to orcas and then also some like attacks and whatnot. So let's go ahead and go over. So conservation in 2008, the IUCN changed its assessment on orcas status as endangered species. And they recognizing that one or more orca types may actually be separate endangered species. So that's what we're talking about in the very beginning when we said that certain types of orcas could be considered different species. So they were just saying that like, oh, orcas are endangered, but they did not look at each different type of orca. So one type could be like killed off and they would still have considered like, oh, they're still endangered or whatever, and not just completely wiped off the face of the earth. So that's why it's important for us to learn like if the orcas are different species so we can try to save them. So there's different threats to orcas. So one is the depletion of prey species like the fishes and seals and whatnot that they eat. Pollution, large-scale oil spills, habitat disturbances such as noise, and then conflicts with boats. And we'll go over like all of these. So, pollution. There is risk of poisoning from bioaccumulation of toxins, which include polychlorinates, chlorinated by, oh my gosh, that's polychlorinated biphenyls. Okay. So there is a risk for pollution and risk of poisoning from bioaccumulation of toxins, which include polychlorinated biphenyls, or BCBs. I think I'm just going to go with BCBs. And bioaccumulation is the gradual accumulation of substances such as pesticides or other chemicals in organisms. And then there's also biomagnification, which is when concentrations of a chemical or metal increases as it moves up the one tropical level of another food chain. So I'll go over kind of what that is because that might not make sense to some people. So bioaccumulation, so if you look at tropic levels and stuff like that, so you'll have krill and stuff like that, and plankton being like the smallest of it. So if plankton and krill like start collecting up stuff, then they'll have a very low accumulation of these substances. But the krill and stuff like that are eaten by penguins. So penguins will eat a lot of krill, so they'll accumulate a lot more of these substances. Then they have a lot inside them, like a magnification of it. And then if a penguin is eaten by an orca, orcas will eat multiple penguins, so it'll even magnify even more. So as you go up the tropic levels of the food chain, the biomagnification increases. And that's how it accumulates inside these organisms, because it will, like the smallest level, so like fish and krill and stuff like that, will go up to penguins or baleen whales, leopard seals, orcas. It'll just keep going up and accumulating more. And that's also what we've seen for mercury that's seen in some ocean fishes like tuna and stuff like that. You'll see that there is a danger of mercury poisoning and stuff like that, because these fish will eat more and more stuff, getting more and more mercury and stuff like that inside of them. And then when we eat them, if you eat a lot of tuna, that could cause problems. Oh, I guess you could look at that a little bit more. But yeah, that's why I was talking about the food web with krill, penguins, to orcas, and then like to Atlantic cod, to orcas, and whatnot. Then, food depletion. So, in the Pacific Northwest, wild salmon stocks, a main food source for these orcas, have declined dramatically in recent years. And then, on the west coast of Alaska, sea lions and seals populations have substantially declined. So, as these food sources decline, there's not going to be enough food for the orcas. So, orcas will either A, have to find a new food source, or B, they'll go hungry. Then noise. So this is a really interesting one for me because I had learned more about sonar from this. But sonar was discovered by the scientist Ken Balcom, and it has been seen that Navy sonars may harm orcas. So whales seem agitated and move haphazardly and attempting to lift their heads free of the water to escape the sound of the sonars when they're activated. So, research in the Bahamas showed that there are 14 beaked whales that were washed up on the shore and were beached on the day U.S. Navy destroyers activated their sonar exercises. So, these 14 whales were breached and 6 of them died, and they did a CAT scale on the whale heads of the ones that died and showed hemorrhaging or brain bleeding around the brain and their ears, which is consistent with decompression sickness, or swimming around from a lower area to a higher area too fast to try to get out of the sonar. Then also shipping and drilling. So you might wonder, okay, like sonars seem to be like fairly safe. I mean, like whenever you think about sonars, you think of just like if you're watching a movie and there's a submarine or something like that, and you just hear the bloop, bloop, like that sound, that's all you hear. Well, there's more to that. So I actually looked into sonar a little bit because of this. And also a story I heard. So, there's 2 types of sonar, active and passive. Passive only be listening for the blips, and then active where they actually send out a pulse of sound. Active can be nearly 300 decibels, which you might not have any idea of like what 300 decibels is, but I'll give you an example. So most concerts that you would go to max out at about 100 to 120 decibels. So imagine a concert being 3 times the sound, like the max sound. That is insane. The effects of the sound, you would immediately be deafened, and then the 300 decibels can easily be enough pressure to rupture a human's internal organs instantly. And then shockwaves can travel further through water than air. So that means that an active sonar shockwave could kill you miles from where it's actually at. That's why it's so dangerous. And that's active and not passive, I'm just going to say again. And then the effects produced by the sound are exponential. So every 10 decibels is a 10-fold increase in the volume and sound pressure. So you might think that, 300 decibels is 3 times the pressure of like a concert's 100 decibels. Well, actually, 300 decibels is 200 times louder than the 100 decibel rock concert, as well as the shockwave is 200 times stronger. So that is insanely strong. But I heard I heard someone say that if you were below like a submarine, like if you're like swimming or scuba diving below a submarine, when they activated their sonar, you would instantly be like obliterated. Like it says that like it could rupture internal organs. I heard that you would just like instantly be turned like to meat paste, which I heard that and it's like, there's no way that is true. But from learning about this, if you're that close, it's very possible. So sonars are scary. That's why you need to be very, especially if you're using active sonar, you need to be very, very cautious of how you use it. So then let's go to the next one, which is oil spills. So there are, of course, oil spills that you guys have heard about. The one that we're going to talk about is the Exxon Valdez oil spill, which adversely affected orcas in the Prince William Sound and Alaska Fords region. 11 members, or about half of one resident pod, disappeared in the following year after the oil spill, which you can think of that as either the oil having an effect on them or an oil having the effect on the species that they eat, causing them to... it's thought that they were actually died. The spill damaged salmon and other prey populations, which in turn damaged local orcas, like I said, killing the prey species. Then the AT1 transient population, which I don't really know what that is. That's just a population that they've labeled. They have 7 individuals and has not reproduced since that spill. So I don't know for sure if it's considered up to now, 2024, or if it was to like another year or something like that. But just because the oil spill happened, there has been no new babies or anything like that, no reproduction inside that species. And because of this, the population is expected to die out and be gone, which is very sad, especially if they are considered another species, a different type of species. So now let's go into other things. So there are some attacks by wild orcas on humans, which there are very, very few attacks from wild orcas on humans. And most of them are not something that like anyone actually gets very hurt. So there are a few confirmed attacks on humans by wild orcas, like I said, and none have been fatal. Orcas have tried to tip ice flows, kind of like I said with like seals and sea lions and whatnot. So they've tried to flip an ice floe on which a dog team and photographer of the Terra Nova expedition were standing on. But it's thought that the sled dog's barking may have sounded enough like a seal call to trigger the orca's hunting curiosity. So it's thought that they thought that it was a seal instead of actual like dogs or humans. Then in the 1970s, a surfer in California was bitten by an orca, then the orca retreated. Then in 2005, a boy in Alaska was splashed in a region frequented by harbor seals and was bumped by an orca that apparently misidentified him as prey. So really the worst of it seems to be the orca biting the guy in California. Those are the only ones I have heard of, and like I said, none of them have actually been that bad and none of them have been fatal. But there are quite a few attacks on humans by captive orcas. And I could not put every single one of them, and I'm not going to talk about every single one of them. But there are some that I wanted to highlight. So, captive orcas have been made nearly two dozen attacks on humans since the 1970s, and there are quite a few. Like, there's a list on Wikipedia, and that's where I got most of these. And some of these attacks have been fatal. So, on April 20th of 1971, SeaWorld, which most of these have happened at SeaWorld, Secretary Annette Eckes was talked into riding the park's main attraction, which was a 10-year-old female orca named Shamu. And she was thrown off the orca's back and then seized by her leg by the orca. Then, in the early 1970s, the orca Hugo refused to allow trainer Chip Kirk to get out of the water, and Hugo bit him on the arm badly enough to leave a scar, and then he grabbed another trainer, Bob Pawlowski, by the wetsuit and began thrashing him around in the water. Another one on February 20th of 1991 at Sea Land of the Pacific in Victoria, British Columbia, a young part-time trainer named Keltai fell into the tank, and it's believed that Nutka, the fourth, rushed over and grabbed her foot and pulled her into the water. And then the other two orcas there that were also in the tank took turns grabbing the trainer, who ultimately drowned, sadly. And then 2010, this is one that I have actually heard of, February 24th of 2010, the large Icelandic bull orca Tilkum killed Dawn Branchu and grabbed her ponytail and pulled her into the water, drowning her. So there are like tons and tons of attacks on humans by captive orcas, which it's one of those things where whenever you keep a big animal like that especially are usually in big social groups inside a small tank, they don't like it. And that's the reason why I think that SeaWorld has stopped their breeding program for orcas, which they still do have some orcas, but they're not having any more. And the orca shows are going to probably stop pretty soon. But yeah. Then there are also human attacks on orcas. So in the waters of the Pacific Northwest in Iceland, the shooting of whales was accepted and even encouraged by the government because they were regarded as pests. That is not so much anymore. And around 25% of orcas which were captured for aquariums through the 1970s had bullet holes or bullet scars in them. So whenever they were going to capture the orcas for aquariums, a lot of them, 25% of them, had like some sort of bullet scars from like these attacks. And then the U.S. Navy claimed to have deliberately killed hundreds of orcas in the Icelandic waters in the 1956 with machine guns, rockets, and depth charges. Which, that oh my gosh, I hate that. I hate that very much. To think that our government or whatnot, our military doing that, which it was in 1956. It was a long time ago, but yeah. Then there is whaling that, of course, happened, where the earliest known records of commercial hunting of orcas dates to the 18th century in Japan. In the 19th and early 20th century, global whaling industry caught immense numbers of baleen and sperm whales, and orcas were largely ignored because of their limited amounts of recoverable oil. And then there are also smaller populations and the difficulty in taking them. So orcas were kind of not touched by whaling in the early times, but then once the stocks of the larger species were depleted of other whales, orcas were then targeted by commercial whalers in the mid-20th century. Then between the 1954 and 1997, Japan took 1,178 orcas, Norway took 987, and Atlantic catch of 916 in the 1979 to 1980s. Then today, there are no countries that carry a substantial hunt of orcas. Although in Indonesia and Greenland, you can get permits, some people can, for small subsistence hunts. So there are still some hunts that happen around there, but they aren't anywhere near as big as they used to be, which is good. So then let's go ahead and go to a more recent thing that has started happening around now, which are attacks on sailboats. Which the attacks on the sailboats began around 2020, and one or more pods of orcas have begun attacking the sailing vessels off the southern tip of Europe, and a few were sunk. And I have a map here behind me that shows it's right off the coast of Spain and then also along France's coast. And those are the areas where the orcas were attacking the sailboats, and a few of these boats were even sunk. And as many as 500 vessels have been damaged between 2020 and 2023. And the orcas were focusing on the rudders of the boats, how the boats steer. And some experts think it's likely to be a bunch of bored teenage orcas looking for something to do. And some of the orcas have broken off the rudders and starting playing with them. So I think it's very possible that these are very intelligent animals, And in the ocean, without like much to do, which it's the entire ocean, I think there's enough stuff to do. But like whenever they find something human and they think it's interesting, especially if it's like something possibly shiny or something that moves that the humans use and stuff like that, they want to interact with it. And that, I think that's the reason why they're messing with the boats, because they're like, oh, this is interesting, I want to play with this, the humans are playing with this, and then they break off a piece of it and they're like, oh, I'm gonna go play with this now. So it's kind of funny to think about, but like they have been sinking boats, so I mean that's sinking boats and causing problems, damaging boats, so it's not good, but it's kind of funny. That is all I wanted to talk about orcas, which that ended up being a fairly long video. It seems like all my educational videos have been getting longer and more thought out, and I love it, but it takes that much longer to make these. Like, I could have added so much more. I could have added more slides on the orca attacks, or I could have added like a lot of different stuff. But I kind of started running out of time because I was still doing this video this week. Like, before I actually recorded this, I was actually still adding to it, like adding pictures, adding little like stuff into it. But yeah, it was very interesting to learn about orcas, especially their vocalizations, and also learning about sonar, stuff like that. Like I was talking about before, orcas are incredibly intelligent, and they're like killing machines. And it's sad to think that they are killing like whales and stuff like that. Whales, other dolphins of their same family, like penguins, whale sharks, stuff like that. And also the way they hunt is kind of sad, but kind of interesting. But yeah, they really are apex predators of the sea. And I'm more scared of, I think, orcas than I would be any shark species or anything like that. Just because of, like, I think it's mostly because they have killed great white sharks. I think that's the main reason why I'm more scared of orcas than that. Because, like, great whites you think of being like, oh, they're the scariest thing in the sea kind of thing. And then you see an orca kill a great white shark and you're like, orcas are the scariest thing in the sea. Or at least that's how I see it, or in my mind at least. But yeah, they're still beautiful creatures. I think it's sad that they are kept in aquariums, especially like at SeaWorld and stuff like that. Even though I do kind of like to see them, because you would not be able to see them anywhere else like close unless it was at these aquariums and whatnot. So I'm kind of torn between, oh, they should be released, to, oh, I think they should be like, I like the idea of being able to see these creatures. So, but yeah, that's all I had on orcas. I hope you guys enjoyed and you guys learned quite a bit about them. I do not know for sure what our next one's going to be. I'll have to decide, but I think I have an idea. But yeah, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this educational video, and I will see you guys next month when I have my next one. So anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time. So, bye!